Okay, everybody, it is my pleasure to welcome John Dumbfoundead Park. Mr. Park first made his entry into the public sphere as a legendary rap artist or rapper in the underground music scene of Los Angeles. He cut his teeth as a battle rapper through the World Rap Championships, Grind Time, King of the Dot, and is now considered by many in the one of the greats in the pantheon of battle rap. Unlike most battle rappers, Mr. Park was able to successfully transition to being a prolific recording artist, and in a 7-year period between his debut release 2011 DFD to the album we were just listening to as we were trickling in, Cafe Blue 2018, he released 7 albums. While that was happening, behind the scenes, he was at the launch of the careers of so many of the major figures of our day, his friends Anderson .Paak, Awkwafina, Jesse, and Rich Brian. He was also a charter member at the founding of 88 Rising. In addition to his work in music, Mr. Park is also a true multi-hyphenate. He is just amongst the texts we've talked about, he's been an actor in some of the most important Asian American cultural texts of the last couple of years, including his character Doug in Awkwafina's Nora from Queens, as well as his voice acting in Raya and The Last Dragon. He's also been a bridge from Korean Americans to the rise of both K-rap and Korean hip-hop, as well as K-pop. He was featured with Keith Ape, and the song that's credited most widely with the rise of Korean rap into the Western world, Ijima. And also he gave BTS their first interview in the United States all the way back in 2014. And while he was doing all of that, almost 5 years ago now, he launched his eponymous podcast, Fun with Dumb. And this podcast has featured, I was just thinking about this last night, an entire roster of the figures we have both invoked and studied in here, including Audrey Nuna, MC Jin, Fumi Abe, Atsuko Okutaka, Bobby Hundreds, as well as Awkwafina. And, oh, one more coming in the room. And in addition to his multi-hyphenate space, he remains committed to being a man of the people, community-centered. So whether he's speaking on anti-Asian violence and sentiment during the pandemic, whether it's taking live calls at the end of each podcast episode from callers all over the world, whether it's speaking to academic audiences such as ours, it is an honor to have you here, my brother. And thank you for being here. Please join me in welcoming John Dumbfoundead Park.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah. Hell of an intro.
So one thing we were talking about on Tuesday, a way we could get started is in your contribution to the Rise book, you were talking about the kinds of transitions that you traced from your generational vantage. So knowing that there were Asian American rap artists before you, Mountain Brothers, Snacky Chan, Jin, but also being at a specific historical vantage from your positioning, and then also from there talking about YouTube, where it used to be a scene and then now it's a platform. So we can get into all of that in the past, but just as an opening question, I'd be curious to hear about where your thoughts are on the culture so far and in the present day.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like back then when there were Asian artists or rappers, you had to be really into that kind of thing to find out about them. For me, I've always kind of had an interest of it, kind of where the other Asians were in the culture. I just was like, where are they? I'm doing this thing, and where are these other cats? And the deeper I dug, I just realized there were, they're sprinkled around. And that's why I collect a lot of old Asian or Asian American collectibles and relics and posters and records, because it kind of reminds me that I wasn't the first one. There's always somebody who's done it before me. A decade ago, there's a record from the 1950s of three Korean sisters that put out an American singing English album, you know, and most Korean artists wouldn't know that. But it's like, it's just a constant reminder that there were these people and early adopters and even stand up, you know, you've had like Margaret Cho in the early 90s, you know. It's like there's just tons of people who've been part of the culture and that's been under the radar, who's probably even getting more shine now, you know. Luckily, even in TV and film, they're bringing kind of the OGs back and giving them their flowers. It's just kind of crazy because only in the last probably 4 or 5 years it's changed for Asian Americans and Asians in America, like media and different areas. I just feel like it's just been crazy. It's like straight up been like revolutionary, and I straight up feel it on my own too as I go to auditions. You know, when I went to an audition for a TV show like 4 or 5 years ago, and it was for like the smallest role on like a shitty TV show, and the part had like 2 lines. I was in the audition room with like the top 10 Asian actors in the world, you know what I'm saying, like that are huge, and this was like a shitty role. So it's kind of crazy to think that, you know, now it's like it's opened the doors up for tons of Asian American actors and entertainers, but at the time it was so limited, and that's pretty recent if you think about it, you know.
So for you, how do you periodize that? Is it Crazy Rich Asians? Is it earlier than that?
I think Crazy Rich Asians was big. That was kind of the one of the huge ones that opened the doors wide open. But I think everything was kind of leading up to that moment. There were little things happening, you know. Even the Oscar So White conversation was probably a big moment.
To
That
which you
helped.
contributed, let's say.
Yeah, I think during that time, my gripe with Oscar So White was that like other ethnic groups were kind of not in conversation. It was just like a very black and white conversation, you know. And we became kind of a butt of the joke as that was being addressed, even like by Chris Rock, you know, during that time. So that kind of rubbed me the wrong way when I was watching the Oscars, and I think a lot of people, a lot of Asians too. So when that came out, it inspired me to like kind of make that song safe, where it was kind of just a flip on the whitewashing of Hollywood and kind of make it like throwing Asian faces on these figures. But that part was kind of frustrating because that created a conversation of like us feeling very invisible. And I think that's a huge thing. It's just like, not only are we just not represented, it just feels like we're completely invisible in a sense. So I think because of that, there are movies like Crazy Rich Asians, and it's just crazy that it just got greenlit with an all Asian, like a movie since 20 years ago, Joy Luck Club. Like it was that long until a movie with an all Asian cast got greenlit. And I'll be honest, it's still not that easy to get greenlight a all Asian cast in a TV show or a movie in Hollywood, even today, I would say. Because a lot of movies get greenlit through star power.
Sure.
And there isn't really enough Asian stars yet. You know, that's why every movie and TV show you'll see probably for the next 2-3 years will have Michelle Yeoh, Awkwafina, or like Ki Kwan, you know, like the two stars that just kind of came out through Everything Everywhere All at Once. So yeah, it's a process.
Okay. You were also the subject of an award-winning documentary by one of the great younger Black women directors of our day, Salima Karoma, Bad Rap in 2016. And we didn't have a chance to watch that together, but that film proposes the possibility of an Asian American rap star who makes it through hip hop, which is your genre and your original lane. Could you talk a little bit about the prospects for where Asian hip hop stands today, maybe since the film or since the turn that you've been invoking through in Hollywood?
Yeah, I feel like it was just this domino effect. It was this ripple effect of things that were happening in this Asian American movement. While Crazy Rich was happening, 88 Rising was coming up as well, and that was the music department of everything. Creating your own Asian pop stars, you know, Asian hit makers. And it was like a perfect storm, you know,
Mhm.
that in the music side, and then TV and film. And I still think there's a long way to go, because I do still feel like the Asian music stars are still mostly from Asia.
Mhm.
Like if you look at the 88 Rising roster, it's still more Asian than Asian American, you know,
Mhm.
and there's nothing wrong with that. It helps each other out. Um, but I do still think America still has a hard time differentiating the two.
So
Um,
to you, a rise of an Asian American rap star would be different from the rise of Rich Brian or Warren Hugh.
I think it helps each other out, but I still think it's different. There's the different stories and different backgrounds that we come from.
Mhm.
You know, I just know, like, if I went to a part, like, I remember when like Squid Game got hot, you know, I'd run into a homie and be like, yo, Squid Game though? And I'd be like, that's tight. You know, it's like it's just like they just automatically like, you're Korean and Squid Game's Korean, you know, but it's like that shit's straight from Korea, you
Right.
know. So there is, like, the stories I would tell would be a lot different, you know, in my upbringing. So
Absolutely.
I think that's the difference, but there's nothing wrong. I think the rise of the popularity of Asia is helping out the Asian American movement, clearly.
Mhm.
But um, yeah, that was really great, and I think right now it's pretty amazing as far as music goes, and it's really surprising that there hasn't been like Asian musical pop stars like earlier. I'm talking like
Uh-huh.
10, 20 years ago, just because it's like it's music, you know. If it had just to do with appearance, then maybe I get it, like in TV and film. But with music, like, you could have made a hit or something and people wouldn't have known that person was Asian or something, you know.
So do you think there's more of that anti-Asian bias prevalent in Hollywood or in the music industry?
Um, that's a tough question. I don't know if there's more anywhere, but um I would say it's kind of equal, considering there hasn't been that many Asian pop stars in the last 20 years or so, you know.
Sure, sure. All right, so let's dig into a little bit about your own story coming up through Lamar Park Project Blowed, coming up in the true underground hip hop scene in a moment in which that was extremely lit in the late 90s, early 2000s. Can you talk a little bit about your influence by Black culture, by hip hop, by the LA scene?
Yeah, when I was 15, I was introduced to an open mic in South Central called Project Blowed, and it was a legendary open mic that just had, you know, 200, 300 rappers go there every Thursday night. And it kind of blew my mind. Like, at the time, I was like the best rapper in my high school and like the house parties that I would go to. And I was very cocky, and then I'd go to this open mic, and like I was like, whoa, like I'm the wackest one here, you know. And it really, like, it made me go back to the drawing board, you know. And I think it's just one of those, like, it was like a Hogwarts of rap school or something, you know. It was like, it's like everyone has those moments, like a stand-up comedian going to like the world famous Comedy Store on the Sunset Strip. It's like that's like the place, that's the dojo, you know. And this was kind of like my dojo. Like, I went there and saw some of the best, a place where they don't really give you a chance to rap. You have to kind of
Mhm.
like take it, you know. It's like when there's ciphers and freestyles going on, you gotta like kind of disrespectfully step into the circle and
Mhm.
like interrupt somebody to get your turn. It really built a lot of confidence in me, and kind of they gave me this tough love kind of element, you know. They weren't really supportive. That's the thing. Like, you know, these spaces is like, it gives you a space to do your thing, but they're not necessarily supportive. You have to kind of earn it. And that's kind of what it did for me. So I was going there every week, like as a freshman in, you know, high school. And this was a school night. It started at like 10 p.m. and like end at like 2 a.m. And be, it'd be 2 a.m. in South Central, and I'd be like, oh, damn, how am I going to get back? So there's times like I razor scooted back from South Central to Koreatown. So to give you a perspective, it's like that place is on 43rd Street, and I lived on 3rd Street. So like that's a mission, you know.
Uh,
It's crazy.
One of the things I've heard you say, and included it in your conversation with James Rowe in the book, is this thing about being this unapologetically Asian. So in this weird kind of cool paradoxical way, your immersion in Black and Latino culture actually made you more profoundly Asian American as an identity and as something you take on. And one of the things we've been talking about in this course is that there's an element of Asian American culture as presently constituted that comes from our generation of folks being really deeply immersed and influenced by Black and other minority cultures. So could you talk a little bit about that coming to Asian American consciousness through Black art forms?
Yeah, I was heavily influenced by Black culture, and as anyone is when they are part of hip hop. Um, but more than just the music and the craft itself, it did make me unapologetically Asian because hip hop is so unapologetically Black, and the artists in hip hop are constantly talking about their roots, what's happening in the communities, and that made me want to lean more into my culture because at the time I wasn't as proud to be Asian, or I had certain identity issues. Um, but it made me realize, like, yeah, that's something that was really cool to see, even in young people rapping or doing anything hip hop related. Like they were so vocal about their communities, and it made me realize, like, that's cool. Like no one rocks with anybody who's not proud of their own culture. It just looks terrible, like when you're ashamed of your own culture and you're not talking about the things that are happening in your community, and especially if no one else is talking about it, it makes you want to speak on it more if you've been given kind of a gift, whether it's through rap or anything. So that was a big eye opener, and then also the different types of people coming from a community. Like when I went to Leimert Park, I only had this one perspective and perception of what Black people were in America. Just this Asian kid listening to the radio or watching TV shows. But the kids that I met and who became like lifelong friends of mine, it was like this like anime Black kid, there was like a punk rock Black kid. Like it was just a very diverse group of people, and they were all rapping too. Everybody was rapping and everyone's doing something. And Leimert Park is like a very like a Afrocentric, like jazz arts community, and there's like the African American museum there, like an old classic historical jazz bar there. So it really, really was like, oh damn, like this is a community that embraces their own culture and their roots, and it did a lot for me to kind of bring that model into my world.
That's great. Let's take it a little bit
Sure.
fast forward to the battle rap days. We were reviewed together your classic battle against Tantrum up in my neck of the woods at Mosswood Park in Oakland. And we were wondering, what is it about battle rap specifically, maybe to the present day, but especially back then, that made it relatively amenable to Asian American talent?
Yeah, like I feel like we were the last ones in battle rap. And it's crazy, even since then, there only been like two prominent Asian battle rappers, which was Jin and me. And then like I haven't battled in 7 years, and I'm battling again like this weekend in Toronto, like as a tribute thing. And it's been 7 years since I've battled, and I realized there still isn't like a new Asian kid like in the battle rap world. And you would think there's, because Jin is like a whole generation before me,
Right.
and then it was me, and then I, at this point it's like a return. This isn't even my second, this is like my third return, like third comeback, and like there still isn't like a young Asian kid somewhere, just coming out of nowhere, just killing dudes. But like it's just like kind of really surprising. I think it's tough. I think it's hard to put yourself in that position because you're gonna get hit with crazy Asian jokes. At least now there's like way more new Asian jokes you can get hit with. That's progress. How far as I'm concerned, it's progress. Like, oh, I can be called 5 more other Asian celebrities now. It's like, so it's I think it's tough because we kind of know the jokes that are coming. You know,
Okay.
the stereotypes and things have lived on for so long, and they've never changed, and it still works. I promise you. Like I can go this weekend, get hit with the same old shit, like Asians can't drive or some kind of punchline, and
Yeah.
you will see the crowd react with a roar. You know, so that part kind of makes me like kind of angry at times because you're just like, wow, really? Like not even at the
Right.
opponent, but like at the crowd, you're like, damn, that shit's still hitting, you know?
Because it feels like sloppy preparation to you. It feels like it's not
Yeah.
targeted towards you as an individual.
But it's not even their fault. It's just kind of like these things that society keeps alive and it's still effective, you know?
Hmm.
Because it's like if I knew certain stereotypes like that worked continuously, like I would use it against my opponent, you know,
Oh, I
and
see.
I did in that battle with Tantrum because
Yeah.
he's an Asian guy. So
Let's talk about the podcast for a second.
sure,
So one of the things about the pod that I've noticed is that it's functioning as a purveyor of Asian American culture, and it's also functioning as a preserver of Asian American culture. That because of the roster of guests that you have coming in, because of the topics that you talk about, because of who you are, who Steffi is, who Rick is. So could you talk a little bit about what you sense from where you're sitting about the influence of Fun with Dumb and its
yeah.
role in the culture?
I mean, originally it wasn't supposed to be an Asian American pod, but it was just like, let me invite a bunch of my friends that are doing cool things to be guests, and I realized, oh, I do have a lot of Asian friends that do cool things, and mostly Asian. So after that kind of was becoming a regular pattern, I was like, actually, I should lean into this more. You know, just kind of like the same realization I had when I went to Project Bloat at first. You know,
Mhm.
kind of seeing what was going on there and bringing it back to my community and my world. I kind of felt the same way with the pod. I was like, at that point, I was kind of like, not necessarily just trying to do Asian stuff because my whole career has been about that, but as I started seeing this pattern and noticing that it's a weird time. Like when I first started doing the pod, I was like, that was when things were starting to brew, you know, with Crazy Rich
Mhm.
and 88 and all that. And I was like, actually, this is the best time to focus in on this and what's happening right now. And I love it, you know, because a lot of these conversations, they're very nuanced, and the worlds that we come from, we can get more specific. And I
Mhm.
feel like our conversations have to get deeper. It can't just be about like when I was growing up and I brought my lunchbox and those weird octopus and squid and everyone looked at me funny. Like how many times have you heard that story? You know what
Right.
I mean? But there's far more nuance to these conversations. So I wanted to hear those stories. I wanted to talk more about these other things. So I love what it's kind of turned into. Yeah.
So one of the things I've noticed through following the podcast is that you're in your own multi-hyphenate lane for yourself, but you're also bringing in guests that shows the vast heterogeneity of the culture, right? So you see all this Asian American influence in streetwear and fashion and in skateboarding and in, of course, in music and in film and TV and so on. Where would, and of course your interest in visual art that stretches back to the zine culture of the 90s. I know you had Eric on from Giant Robot recently. And so a question I have would be, what lane do you see a lot of innovation occurring in the present day that we might not like necessarily think of at first?
I just think we're helping push a lot of existing cultures forward, you know, as Asians have kind of always, like, you know, especially like you know, we've seen Japanese culture like
Mhm.
take things to the next level, whether it's streetwear and stuff and collaborations between communities, whether it was like Pharrell, Nigo,
Mhm.
and uh I think in America, like just we are expanding, I think, just the globalization of like Asia to America is crazy. Like it's so weird. I don't even I that's why earlier when I was talking about like Asian and Asian American, like that line is just blurry now, you know. Like
Right, right.
music coming out of any country in Asia is just it's just global music. It's everywhere. Never thought that would happen, just like turning on the radio and hearing like Korean lyrics or even Spanish, you know. So everything is blurred. There's no
Okay.
something coming out from there. It's just like, so it comes out of somewhere and it's global. So I like that. And it's really weird because me specifically being Korean and hearing that, it's just so, it feels very weird, like just seeing my own language as such a foreign language growing up.
Mhm.
And now it's really not. I'll meet fans of different ethnic backgrounds that could speak Korean better than me. So, yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
That's great. Should we open it up to questions? Yeah, Ali.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So I just want to say thanks for coming, John. Thanks for speaking to us. Before I ask my question, I just want to say I listened to your music for the first time this week, and I thought it was pretty cool. And I look forward to listening to your podcast this weekend. But earlier you mentioned that Asians were kind of like the last people to get into battle rap. And I was interested in what you had to say about Asians being in hip hop spaces, but also entertainment in general. And do you feel like being Asian made you stand out? And if it did make you feel stand out, if you did feel like you stood out, do you ever feel like you had to lean more into your Asianness or less?
No, that's a good question. Actually, I do feel like it made me stand out, and I love that part of it. When I went to that open mic in South Central, it was like 200 Black and Latino kids, and I was like the only Asian kid. But if you're like a entertainer who's like, artists are very like self-centered people. They would just want the attention, So it's like, I wanted to be heard, and if I stood out as the only Asian kid, like people are going to be interested, they're going to be like, oh, what does this kid have to say? And they might still roast you and clown you, but you're going to get a listen, and I never saw being Asian as a crutch. I always did see it as an opportunity to stand out amongst a sea of people that don't look like you. Right. So I actually definitely think that helps. Like it helped Eminem out. Eminem was in 8 Mile, Detroit. Like he was the only, white dude there, but he knew he was going to stand out because he was dope, So he knew like once he spits, like people are going to listen, And I'll tell you, one of the best compliments I ever got was still offensive. It was like, damn, Jackie Chan can spit. And I was like, that was the most special moment of my life. Yeah. But yeah, like I definitely think I never saw it as a crutch. Hip hop is about standing out, being unique. If you see like old hip hop photos from the early 80s in New York, they're dressed crazy. They got like fur coats and like shorts, like netted fishnet shorts, and like it was about standing out. So to me, like I felt like I stood out for sure.
Other questions? Yeah, Emma.
I also want to echo, thank you so much for coming to speak to us. It's really cool to get to talk to you and kind of hear about what the music scene has been like. I know something that I've kind of been following and seeing on social media is there's been a lot of conversation about the commodification of hip hop, where hip hop is this really cool way to kind of communicate these social issues, but how much of it kind of just gets consumed and like propagates kind of in this like capitalist cycle versus how much of it is really getting these messages and these points across. So I kind of just wanted to know, like, as a hip hop artist yourself and somebody who is involved in all of these ways, kind of what are your thoughts on it? How do you see the genre of hip hop kind of shifting, evolving in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many subgenres of hip hop, and people have to realize, yeah, there's going to be stuff that might not have a lot of substance, and it's fine because it's fun. And it comes from, some things come from a real place, some things might be made up, some things are like kind of the everyday slice of life raps, but you can find it. You gotta go look for it, So I don't like to generalize like, oh, the state of hip hop now is not as good as this, or what was that like it's just way more genres of hip hop. There's tons, there's rap in different languages that I don't know what the hell is going on in that world, you know? Like I was like, we don't know, right? Like you don't know the language, you can try to dig into it. But it just connects with people in different ways. And I just it's amazing. Like I just love even the story of hip hop, you know, how it started and to where it's become. It's become the most influential genre of all time, you know, in music. And it started like in South Bronx, like with a bunch of kids like who had nothing, you know, and I think that's like the most beautiful and most artistic thing that I ever heard. You know, some kids like cardboard box, a boom box, or two turntables, or you know, can of spray paint cans, and turning it into what it is now is like insane, you know. And I know sometimes like, talking about that kind of sounds cheesy, but it's like so real. It's like such a beautiful thing, and somehow it like influenced me. You know, how it influenced me was like when I was like 5 years old, I went with my parents to work. They had a small shop in downtown LA. They couldn't afford a babysitter, so they'd take me to work with them. And the store right next to them was an electronics store, and they just played rap music out the boombox every single day, you know. So that's how I got influenced by hip hop. But it's like that whole journey to how it got to that point, it's just so crazy. Yeah, so it's still a beautiful thing, you know, like we can go dive into all these things of the business and what's happened to it, but I just think the root of it is just still beautiful, you know.
Again, thank you for coming and talking. So you talked a little bit earlier about kind of the Western response to like your community goals or whatever. So like how the audience might laugh at Asian stereotypes, jokes where about like in rap battles that might be something that you're targeted with. I'm interested in knowing more about how maybe you've seen the Asian reaction or Asian American reaction to these things, how that's impacted like your journey, I guess. So how like maybe if they are overwhelmingly positive, seeing someone like them doing these things that previously haven't been done before, haven't been seen or projected as much in the Western audience, or if maybe there's some sort of judgment there, because I know that a lot of the times for lots of immigrants, it's kind of like trying to follow the American dream. The American dream typically looks like, you know, building success in a more professional, or not professional, but like in a different manner than entertainment, because I know that a lot of, well, at least from my experience, a lot of Asian immigrants tend to see entertainment as not a place for Asian Americans, I suppose. So I was trying to see how your experience with that has.
Yeah. I mean, it's been positive, you know. It's funny because we grow up hearing that, right, from like the older generation of Asians, or not even older generations. I think there was times where I was judged by like peers, you know, because they didn't know how to project their anger. Like they could be angry as fuck about things going on in society and like how Asians were perceived or names that we were being called or getting picked on, but they're just angry. They want to like, you know, I knew like Asian gangsters that just wanted to like go and stir up some crazy shit, you know. But Asian entertainers, we find a way to kind of get in there and tell our story or our side in a different way, you know. So when I stepped into that arena and started battle rapping, I had a lot of Asian kids who thought I was like nerdy in the beginning, and all of a sudden they're like, yeah man, you're holding it down for us. they're like giving me props. And because they, you know, a lot of those dudes, they don't know how to they don't know how to do that, you know. They don't know how to do that, or how to actually get through, like how to get the oohs and ahs like from what they're saying, you know. They could like, you know, that's why you got to learn how to roast. You got to learn how to fight back, even verbally, you know what I'm saying? Like if someone can clown on you and your reaction just can't be like, fuck y'all, man, that's messed up, you know. Like you can't, you know what I'm saying? You got to like, you got to have a smart response. That's why humor and comedy and all these things are important. You got to know how to talk. And I think that's what I learned how to do. You know, like somebody makes a joke about me, I deflect the joke. You know, there's some Bruce Lee move right there. I deflect the joke, and all of a sudden I put the attention on him, and everyone's laughing at him. It's like, that's real, you know. I think when people saw me do that, they were, and even Jen, they became proud, you know, of like themselves and what we're capable of. Like everybody saw a little of themselves in me, or a little bit of themselves in Jen, and these battle rappers. And we see it in movies, right? In fictional movies when they're fighting back, and like we see a little bit of ourselves fighting back. So I think the response was great, you know, and it's always great when you see somebody who looks like yourself doing something amazing. You're like, oh damn, like we can do that, you know. So I felt like that was really cool, you know, just seeing that. That was a surprise for me, all of a sudden be going from like a zero to like a hero, you know. It was like, it really felt like that in those moments. But that's why it's important. We live in America is a huge roasting culture, comedic, you know, like it's not a soft world, you know. We have to like be able to defend ourselves and kind of play in that same pool. If it's entertainment, like if it's battle rap, then we're gonna have to learn how to do that. If it's comedy, if it's this sports or whatever, like we got to like put ourselves out there in that world and get good at it. And I think, yeah, that's why I always tell younger cats, like, you know, just really keep up, you know, keep up. So, yeah.
Jimmy?
There's, again, thank you for being here and talking to us, but there is like, there's a difference between the perception of maybe an artist as an Asian American with the audience, but then also like among your colleagues and the people within the industry. Have you seen like the difference between perception and acceptance within the industry compared to maybe like an audience as a whole?
I'm sorry, what were the two industries we're talking about? It's kind of far away, so I just
Sorry, can you hear me now?
yeah, if you could speak a little louder. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the comparison between the perception that people within the industry have of you as an Asian American versus like the perception that just the general audience has of you in the industry as an Asian American.
I think in the industry, meaning not necessarily Asian, right? Or you mean like
Right,
anybody?
yeah. Just like anybody that is in the music industry.
Yeah, like to be honest, like I really don't care about what the perception like. I really don't care about the perception of within the industry, you know, because I chose a path and a specific voice that I wanted to, you know, project and a specific community I want to speak to, right? And people make that their goal and mission in life. And that's like the world I chose. You know, I chose to kind of uplift like the Asian voices and around me and the creatives. But yeah, I definitely think there's still a lot of industry people that can't see the importance or the vision of like the Asian American voice or the Asian voice in the industry. That's why we don't see as many projects, and there's always just one big award season darling of sorts, you know. But for the most part, it's love. I think in general, even if what I do isn't directly connected to another person's world or connection, they can respect it, you know. They can respect it, and I think, yeah, and I love that. If you can see that, we can have a lot of empathy for each other, you know. Yeah.
Anyone want to jump in? Oh.
Hey, yo, it's me again. So Dr. Reed had mentioned earlier that hip hop made you feel more Asian. I thought that was like a really cool thing. so, or like, made you feel more connected to being Asian? And I was hoping you could tell us more about your inspirations, especially in early adulthood, and how that kind of formed for you.
Yeah. I talked about this earlier, but when I was growing, I don't know if I actually talked about it earlier, in the 90s to early 2000s, there was a movement that was so rare in American culture. It was the AZN movement, of like Asian kids who were super proud to be Asian. Like that wasn't me necessarily, but I had kids around me who was in Rice Rockets, that had hot import car magazines, who wore their bangs down to their face. Like, they had fashion, they had this car culture. They were like, just hanging out with themselves in parking lots, smoking cigarettes. And it was just like a whole thing. And at that time, I just couldn't connect. I was like a skateboarder kid and like, I was like kind of a nerd, but at that time, there was a whole movement of Asian kids, and it was really big on the internet. They had their own memes and little like crazy animations and everything. And it was like, it was similar to like kind of like the Chicano culture with lowriders and all that too. It was like very similar to that. And at the time, I was like clowning on them. I was like, look at these fools, look at the Rice Rockets and all this shit. And then like I got older, and I was like, damn, that was really cool. Like they had it figured out at a young age. You know what I mean? They were like so proud of who they were at a young age and didn't care what other people thought. They didn't even look for acceptance anywhere because they created their own community, So thinking back, I actually feel like that was a big influence. Like I actually really respect that. We talk about so much about like identity issues and trying to be accepted somewhere instead of trying to build our own community and build our own thing, so I really did respect that, like that they had their own space for that.
Hey, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Awesome, perfect. Again, thank you so much for being here. It's really an honor. I just wanted to ask and mention that like through our own experience and through this course that we've seen a connection between rap and Asian identity through various different modes such as 88 Rising and I'd say Western access to K-pop and the presence of like rap in the genre and even sampling of like the Japanese city pop in hip hop and rap in the West today. I just wanted to ask you, how do you think this is affecting like the present and the future for Asian Americans specifically in hip hop, as well as the shape of the genre as a whole?
Yeah, I think we're about to, in the next 5 years, I will say we will see our version of like an Asian American Eminem. And we haven't really seen that. We've seen people play big parts in hip hop in America that are Asian, whether it's me, like Far East Movement was like one of the first groups signed to a major that's Asian and different people that I'm sure your professor has mentioned. But I think we're going to see like that Eminem kind of guy, what maybe Bad Bunny is to like Latin music in America, or like what Eminem was to as a white rapper in America. Like we're gonna see that Eminem dude, and he's gonna be some like Asian kid from the Midwest somewhere in some fucking cornfield or some shit who's been freestyling in the cornfields for the last 10 years. And he's gonna be nasty, and he's gonna come in the game and he's gonna be that dude. And I think that's gonna probably open up like kind of the next wave of Asian Americans in music. So I feel like that's kind of what I predict. And if it's not a rapper, it could be like an R&B singer. It could be, somebody else who's fully kind of embraced their Asianness. But I think what's happened in music too, because of the rise of Asian American artists, and Asian artists from Asia and BTS and all that, it's actually given a lot more pride in a lot of the half Asian artists. We're talking about like even in the Bay Area, we're talking about Saweetie and, there's Guapdad and Her and all these people who are actually embracing a lot of their Asian side too. And and I'm not saying they never were. I don't know their history or the background, how they grew up, but I know for a fact that even a lot of my close half Asian friends have kind of leaned more into repping that side more. It was always kind of repping the non-Asian side more, but now it's like, okay, like, and that's okay. Like, I have no judgment. There's a lot of born again Asian, as I like to call it.
And something happened on the industry side of things too, right? From the Asian American position, it feels like we're considering Blasian figures more on our team. When we were growing up, I couldn't imagine A. being embraced by like a subset of Asian Americans in the same way that we've embraced Anderson or her.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, like, the coolest shit you could be is a Blasian artist, honestly. You know, it's like that's great. That's not even fair, really. But it's pretty incredible seeing that, you know. I think I definitely think I've seen a lot more of that embrace. Actually, I think Blasian artists are helping push Asian culture
Right.
forward. Super tough, you know. I definitely think like we can use a lot of respect in different cultures, you know. Even in Black culture, I think we've had such a divide between those cultures, the Black and Asian community, you know, and Blasian artists are really helping bridge that gap a lot, especially with younger kids who might not have a mutual respect for both each culture, you know. So the Blasian artists are helping that a lot. I always say that's one of the biggest things during like Stop Asian Hate, and where we saw so much of a divide between Black and Asian culture. I think Blasians play an important role in that.
Absolutely. Yeah, Edie.
Again, thank you so much for coming in. I just thought it was interesting the back. I saw like the mixture of like your Koreatown street sign, like the Mad Villain poster. And I was wondering, like, back like in your like battle rap days, like how you feel like you fit in, like surrounded by Black artists like MF doing the Mad Villain, and like how you feel like that kind of impacted your like start.
Yeah. Like I said, I think also just seeing Black artists that were weird is what actually made me more like connected and helped me and inspired me, because I told you, like, early on, my perception of Black culture was anything that I just heard on the radio or television. Then I'd see like a lot of weird kind of Black artists, you know, whether it was like MF Doom or, you know, guy who wears a mask all the time, you know, Cool Keith, and you know, the different people, and especially in my world of like my peers that were the Black goth kid, the punk rock kid, the anime kid. Like, it made me feel connected because I was the outside guy in my own community, you know, like what they were probably to their own community in the Black community. So I connected with a lot of them, like kind of the outcasts of their own community. And that's kind of what Donald Glover and Issa Rae is. You know, when you see Insecure and when you see Atlanta, they're telling the story of these communities that we've heard, but from the outside perspective of your own community. Like, they're talking, Donald Glover's like an outsider in his own community. Issa Rae is an awkward Black girl from her own community, you know. And there's always an interesting kind of perspective with that, because you're from that world and you're outside of it too, but you don't make fun of that world as an outsider. You still feel very connected to it, and you want to protect the voices of the locals that people stereotype or see as one thing. So I have a very like interesting relationship with Koreatown. I see stuff within the community that people might judge or stereotype, but I also want to protect it, you know? So I want to put it in the best light possible while keeping like the honesty of it.
Yeah.
Hey, Dom. I listened to your music when I started listening to it when I was in middle school, and I'm 26 now.
Damn, bro! Congratulations, you made it to college, man.
But it's cool to see your transformation. Like, I remember watching you on YouTube, like the battle raps and all that, and just like you sticking out as a rapper and being Asian. I just thought that was pretty cool, being Hispanic myself, growing up in South Carolina, you know, it's a smaller population over here of Hispanics than like in LA, for example. But I just thought it was really cool what you were doing and what you've done so far. And it's really inspirational. But I was just wondering how, you know, Hispanic culture has affected your perspective. Because I know being in Los Angeles, obviously, there's a lot of Hispanics around, a lot of Mexican. So I was just wondering how that affected your view on things and affected your art.
Yeah. Now I'm glad you asked that, because honestly, it was a huge part of my upbringing. Before I went to Leimert Park, South Central, I was already growing up around Mexicans, Guatemalans, Salvadorians. That was my only friend base. You know, when I was telling you, like, I was an outsider of like the Asian community, my only friends were Latino. Like, they were all Latino. And then so I was super influenced by that. I mean, especially growing up in Los Angeles. And I always say, I think like a lot of Asian culture, in at least the West Coast, is very influenced by Latino culture. If you look at like an Asian dude in the neighborhood, like, who just kind of grew up in this hood, it's like everything is kind of very Latino influenced, you know? So yeah, like I grew up heavily with that Mexican kind of influence around my neighborhood in Koreatown, and hung out with the you know, Mexican skateboarders, went to like backyard punk rock gigs and shows. Yeah, you see, like, I was like a weird kind of rapper, like, because I was going to shit like that, you know, punk rock shows, backyard, and, you know, hung out with like Mexican kids that loved Morrissey, you know, like shit like that. So yeah, and I was born in Argentina, so my parents speak fluent Spanish. I know that's like a crazy weird part that I left out of my life, but my parents speak fluent Spanish. So I think a part of that was interesting, because I think most Asian parents, if you brought home like Latino friends or Black friends, like, they might first be kind of caught off guard, you know, especially like immigrant Asian parents. But my parents was like, cool, like, they just spoke Spanish. They didn't know how to speak English, so they just spoke Spanish and Korean. So if you're not Korean, you're getting Spanish. Like, you could be Black, you could be white, in Spanish, you know. So I definitely think there was a little bit more of an open-mindedness there.
Anyone else?
This is kind of more of a fun question, I guess, but since you are a musical artist, if somebody came up to you and asked, like, what's one song of yours that you wish for them to listen to, is there a specific song that you would kind of tell people to listen to? And is there a reason why that particular song?
I think Are We There Yet? Probably just because it was like 3 verses of different parts of my life that are very important to me. It was like family, like a girl, more intimate relationship, and then it was like my career, you know. I think, you know, that was very early and I was a lot younger, but and my world has expanded, and things that are important to me have changed as well. My relationship with my career has changed. I don't want my whole life and world just to be defined by a career as well. I think I'm learning a lot of that too. So yeah, that song Safe was a big one, obviously. I think because I'm so involved in Asian and Asian American culture, that was cool. I think it had a little bit of a angry, frustrated element to the song, which is really portrayed in that. But I'm really excited to kind of journey off into these different mediums like TV and film. I feel like I'm going to do stuff in that world and talk about things in a way that I've never talked about through my music. So I'm excited about that. And stand-up is one of the most honest areas. I think I couldn't have done stand-up during that time as opposed to now. I needed like all these experiences, the way I was gathering my thoughts, to be able to do it right now. So I don't have this regret of like not starting super early on that.
Isabel?
Sort of going off of that, now that we're educated on all of the things that you do, would you recommend any of your Asian colleagues, whether it be like a musical artist or comedian or someone else is a media to learn more about?
More Asian artists. Let me see. I feel like I've shared a lot through my podcast and people I've talked about. I'm trying to think if there's any new one. I really haven't been on the pulse as much as I used to be, and I used to be a lot more on the pulse. You know, damn. Let me think about that. I don't know. Maybe I can like send a list to your professor and you can share it or something. I think that'd be easier to do. But yeah, I just feel like, I mean, the one thing I can tell you guys is like just look around you guys, and if you guys are aspiring musicians or like finding new artists, like really support them, because I never thought like 10, 15 years ago, you know, meeting Anderson or Doja Cat and you know, Aquafina, that these people were just gonna be like the top artist in the game. Like, it's weird. Like, I'm best friends with Aquafina and Anderson, and like, it's crazy. They're like literally some of the top people in the game, you know? And it's just like, it's insane. Like, it really does happen. And it's really inspiring kind of seeing that, knowing that like, oh, these were just people just grinding back in the day, and now they become, you know, the top of their game. And Doja Cat I found out on SoundCloud, and I interviewed her off of just that, and then we became friends. And she was part of the LA scene, and trust me, she was just like a regular. She'd go to Project Blow, the open mic that I talked about. She'd go there. She was just showing up at LA rap shows. So it's all like real. Like, this thing is real. Like, you go to these places, you'll see talent, and you never know what they're gonna be in the future. Like, that's the biggest takeaway that I've had from those experiences. Like, you really never know. And it is possible. It's crazy.
I think that's the perfect inspirational note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us, John. Let's give it up for Dumbfoundead one more time. Thank you so much. Have fun in Toronto.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. What was this class again?
Asian American culture in the 21st century.
Okay, cool. Thank God. All right, I focused on that. All right, cool. I probably should have asked that at the top of the class. All right, yeah. I knew it was Asian American related, but thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate you.
Of
Peace.
course.
Yeah.
Take care.